The old house creaked. Sarah loved visiting her grandmother, but the house always spooked her a little. This time it was the attic. She felt drawn to its mysterious door. Dust swirled in the air as she pushed it open. Cobwebs clung to everything. Shadows danced in the dim light. What secrets hid in this dusty place?
Breathes in. The musty air tickled her nose.
She imagined forgotten treasures hidden beneath white sheets. A floorboard groaned under her weight, echoing in the silence. Sarah shivered, a sense of unease creeping up her spine. Something felt different, like unseen eyes watched her every move. An old trunk sat in the corner. Its brass latches were tarnished with age, hinting at the many years it had been left untouched. Sarah knelt, and with a creak, she lifted the lid. The sound echoed through the attic, breaking the silence that had settled like dust. Yellowed clothes and faded photographs peeked out, each item a fragment of a forgotten past, whispering stories of days long gone. Then she saw it, a porcelain doll. Its delicate features were almost lifelike, capturing a moment frozen in time. It lay nestled in the corner as if forgotten, yet it seemed to hold a presence that demanded attention. Its dress was once a vibrant crimson, now faded with time. The fabric, though worn, still held a hint of its former glory, but it was the eyes that captivated Sarah. They were unlike any she had ever seen on a doll. They were a piercing blue, like icy shards of glass, reflecting a depth that seemed almost human. They seemed to stare right through her, holding a strange, unsettling intensity. It was as if the doll had a soul trapped within its ceramic shell.
Shivers. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine despite the attic's warmth. The air around her seemed to grow colder, the shadows deeper.
The doll was beautiful, but there was something off. Its beauty was marred by an inexplicable sense of dread. An aura of unease surrounded it, making Sarah's breath catch in her throat. She couldn't shake the feeling that the doll was watching her, waiting for something. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. The doll's eyes seemed etched into her mind. She tossed and turned, a feeling of dread growing in her stomach. It was then she heard it, a faint giggle. It seemed to come from the hallway just outside her door. Sarah froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Had she imagined it?
Whispers. She held her breath, listening intently.
There it was again. This time it was a soft whisper, barely audible but undeniably real. Sarah pulled her blankets tighter, fear constricting her chest. The old house creaked and groaned around her. Each sound sent shivers down her spine. The doll wasn't just a doll. Sarah was sure of it. The next morning, Sarah tried to shake off the fear. Maybe it was just an old house settling. But when she entered the attic, she found something that shattered her fragile composure. The doll had moved. It now sat upright, its piercing blue eyes staring directly at her.
Gasps. Sarah felt a cold dread grip her heart. How was it possible?
She cautiously approached the doll, her steps hesitant. Its expression seemed to have changed too. The corners of its porcelain lips seemed to curl into a faint, unsettling smirk. Panic welled up inside her. Sarah backed away, her heart hammering against her ribs. The doll was alive. It had to be.
Section 5. Locked away. I knew I had to do something. The doll had been a source of constant dread, a silent observer that seemed to hold a sinister presence. I couldn't bear the thought of another night with that doll. Its eyes seemed to follow me, and I felt its cold gaze even in my dreams.
She carefully picked it up, her hands shaking. The weight of the doll felt heavier than it should, as if it carried the burden of countless untold stories. Its porcelain skin was surprisingly cold, as if all the warmth had been sucked out of it. The doll's lifeless eyes seemed to bore into her soul. Sarah quickly placed the doll back in the trunk, her heart pounding in her ears. She could almost hear a whisper, a faint echo of a forgotten past. She slammed the lid shut, the sound echoing through the silent attic. It was as if the house itself sighed in relief. Then she secured the latches, her hands trembling. It was locked away, but the unease lingered, like a shadow that refused to leave.
I hurried out, slamming the attic door behind me. The creak of the old wood echoed in the hallway, a reminder of the secrets hidden within. I felt a sense of relief wash over me. The air felt lighter, but the memory of the doll's cold touch lingered. But deep down, a knot of unease remained. I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't truly over, that the doll's presence still haunted the house. It wasn't over, I could feel it. The shadows seemed to whisper, and the air was thick with a sense of foreboding. The doll was locked away, but its story was far from finished. Section 6. Beyond the Glass. That night a storm raged outside. Rain lashed against the windows and wind howled like a banshee. I lay in bed, my fear heightened by the storm's fury.
She kept replaying the events of the past few days in her mind. The whispers, the moving doll, the chilling feeling of being watched. It all felt like a terrible nightmare.
Suddenly, a flash of lightning illuminated the night. It cast an eerie glow on the figure standing outside my window. I gasped in horror. It was the doll. Its piercing blue eyes glowed in the darkness, a triumphant smirk on its porcelain face. It was no longer trapped in the attic. It was here.
The next morning, Sarah called her best friend, Lily. Her voice trembled as she recounted the terrifying events of the previous night. Lily listened patiently, her brow furrowed with concern.
A haunted doll?
Lily finally said, her voice a mix of skepticism and worry. Sarah nodded, her eyes pleading for understanding. She knew it sounded crazy, but it was all true.
Okay, we'll figure this out.
Relief washed over Sarah. She wasn't alone. Together they would face this. They had to find a way to get rid of the doll, for good. Lily, despite her initial doubts, was determined to help. They researched ancient rituals and consulted dusty old books, searching for a solution to their terrifying problem. Following instructions found in a weathered tome, Sarah and Lily gathered candles, salt and sage. Their hands moved with a mixture of fear and determination. The air grew heavy with anticipation as they lit the candles, their flickering flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. Sarah held her breath, her heart pounding against her ribs. They chanted the words of the cleansing ritual, their voices echoing in the stillness of the house. The air crackled with unseen energy. But as they finished, a cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing the candles. And then they heard it, a low growl, guttural and menacing, seeming to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The ritual had failed. Terror gripped Sarah's heart. The house felt colder now, filled with an oppressive presence. The doll's power was growing, feeding off their fear. Strange occurrences plagued them. Doors slammed shut on their own. Objects moved inexplicably. Whispers followed them like ghostly shadows. Fear was a constant companion. They had to do something, and fast. Sarah knew running wouldn't help. The doll seemed to hold an unnatural power over her, tethering her to the house. There was only one option left: confront the doll. With newfound resolve, Sarah and Lily climbed the creaking stairs to the attic. The dim light barely illuminated their path, casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. Each creak of the wooden steps echoed through the silent house, amplifying their growing sense of dread. Each step felt heavy, laden with dread. The weight of their fear seemed to press down on them, making the journey feel endless. They could almost hear their own hearts pounding in their chests, a rhythmic reminder of the danger that lay ahead. The air grew colder as they approached the old trunk. A chill ran down their spines, and the dim light seemed to flicker, casting ominous shadows that danced around them. The attic felt like a different world, detached from the rest of the house, filled with an unsettling stillness. Sarah's hand trembled as she unlatched it, her breath catching in her throat. The metal latch felt icy to the touch, and the sound of it opening seemed to reverberate through the attic, breaking the oppressive silence. But the trunk was empty. The doll was gone. The sight of the empty trunk was both a relief and a new source of terror. The absence of the doll raised more questions than it answered. A wave of relief washed over Sarah, only to be replaced by a chilling thought. The doll, which had caused so much fear, was no longer confined to the trunk. It was out there somewhere, and they had no idea where it could be. If the doll wasn't in the trunk, where was it? The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswered. The uncertainty gnawed at them, making the attic feel even more oppressive. The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswered. The silence of the attic seemed to amplify their fear, making every shadow seem more menacing, every creak more sinister. Sarah and Lily exchanged a nervous glance. Their eyes conveyed what words could not. A shared understanding of the danger they were in and the unspoken promise to face it together. The house was silent now, the previous events seeming like a fever dream. The oppressive quiet was almost deafening, a stark contrast to the chaos that had ensued earlier. It was as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for the next move. But the feeling of unease lingered, a constant reminder that some things are better left undisturbed. The shadows seemed to watch them, and the air was thick with a sense of foreboding. They knew that whatever had been unleashed was far from over. They had escaped the doll's clutches for now, but for how long? The question lingered in their minds as they cautiously made their way back down the stairs, constantly looking over their shoulders, knowing that the true horror was just beginning.